The stranger in the shadows. Aarav had grown used to the ache of hunger, the chill of night air, and the constant reminder of loss. Once a husband and father, he now wandered the streets with little more than a torn jacket and a small bag of keepsakes. His wife's absence still pressed on his chest like an unhealed wound. Home, to him, had become nothing but a memory. Every evening, he found himself drawn to the small neighborhood park. It was not comfort that called him there, but the sound of children, laughter that reminded him of a time when his own little girl had once run toward him with open arms. The benches were cracked, the swings rusted, yet the place carried a warmth that city streets could not. And in that park, he often saw them, the twins. Anaya and Arian were 8 years old, with curious eyes that rarely looked away from him. Where others saw a worn-down man, the children saw something different, though Aarav could not guess what. They whispered to each other, sometimes pointing shyly in his direction, then giggling as though sharing a secret only they understood. Their mother, Meera, usually sat nearby, her hands resting in her lap, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. She was in her early 30s, yet her face carried the quiet exhaustion of someone older. There was elegance in her posture, grace in her every movement, but her smile, when it came, was faint, fragile, and gone too quickly. Aarav noticed the way she avoided the eyes of other parents, as if she bore a weight invisible to the rest of the world. Meera's husband was seldom with them. The few times Aarav had seen him, he was a tall man with sharp features and sharper words. Raghav never lingered in the park. He arrived in expensive suits, his phone pressed to his ear, and when he did speak to Meera, his voice carried impatience rather than affection. He never looked at the children long enough to see their eagerness for his attention. Aarav did not need to hear the gossip to sense the fracture in that family. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and violet, the twins approached him. Aarav had been sitting on his usual bench, hands folded, eyes lowered. He looked up to find them standing in front of him, their expressions unusually serious for children their age. "You want a home," Arian said, his voice steady yet filled with the earnestness only a child could summon. "And we need a father for our mother," Anaya added, her small hand clutching her brother's. The word struck Aarav harder than any winter wind. He blinked, unsure if he had misheard. No, their faces were too solemn for a joke. He opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came. What answer could he give to children who spoke with such disarming clarity? Meera hurried toward them, her eyes wide with alarm. "Anaya, Arian, what are you saying?" she whispered sharply, pulling them back. Yet her voice trembled, not with anger but with something else. Fear, shame, or perhaps a recognition she dared not admit aloud. Aarav lowered his gaze. "They're only children," he said quietly, though inside, their words echoed with startling accuracy. He didn't want a home, and it was clear their mother needed more than the shadow of a husband she currently had. Meera gave a polite but strained smile, murmured an apology, and led the twins away. But that night, as Aarav lay beneath the half-broken shelter of an old building, he replayed the scene again and again. The children's voices, so pure and certain, carried a truth that pierced him. He had not imagined the loneliness in Meera's eyes. It was real, just as his own emptiness was real. Days passed, and Aarav kept his distance. Yet the twins continued to greet him, waving when they saw him at the park, sometimes slipping him half of a cookie or an apple slice when their mother wasn't watching. Slowly, cautiously, he began speaking with them, teaching Arian how to tie a firmer knot in his shoelaces, showing Anaya how to balance on the swing without falling. They laughed, and in their laughter, Aarav felt a piece of himself stir back to life. Meera noticed. She watched from the bench, torn between relief that her children smiled and unease at the bond forming with a stranger. And yet, each time she caught Aarav's eyes, she did not look away as quickly as before. There was a question lingering there, unspoken but undeniable. Why did her children trust this man so easily, and why did she, against her better judgment, feel safer in his presence than she had in her own husband's? One evening, as the wind grew colder, Meera found herself lingering after the park had emptied. The twins skipped ahead, chasing each other, leaving her and Aarav a few steps behind. Silence stretched between them until Meera finally spoke. "They shouldn't have said that to you," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the ground. "About being a father. They don't understand." She hesitated, then sighed. "Or maybe they understand more than I give them credit for." Aarav's voice was low, steady. Children see what adults try to hide. Her eyes lifted to his, and for a moment, neither spoke. The air carried not just the scent of rain, but the weight of something dangerous, something forbidden, a possibility neither of them had expected, yet both of them felt. When the twins called out for their mother, the moment broke. Meera hurried to them, her figure fading into the dusk. Aarav remained, hands clenched in his pockets, the words of the children replaying once more in his mind. He wanted a home, and perhaps, though he dared not admit it yet, they all wanted the same thing. Forbidden longing. The rain fell hard that evening, drumming against rooftops and soaking the narrow lanes of the neighborhood. Aarav had taken shelter beneath a tree, his jacket clinging to his shoulders, the dampness seeping into his bones. He had grown accustomed to discomfort, yet tonight felt different. His body ached more than usual, and his mind refused to quiet. The words of the twins, so bold, so piercing, lingered with him still. When Meera stepped out of her house and saw him standing in the downpour, hesitation flickered across her face. She glanced quickly over her shoulder, as though fearing judgment from unseen eyes, before walking toward him. Her umbrella tilted above her head. She stopped a few feet away, uncertainty etched into every line of her posture. "You'll fall sick out here," she said softly. "Come inside, at least until the rain eases." Aarav hesitated. He had lived long enough on the edge of society to know where he did and did not belong. Yet the warmth in her tone, however fragile, cut through his resistance. With a nod, he followed her through the gate and into the modestly lit house. The interior smelled faintly of sandalwood and fresh linen. Photographs lined the hallway, smiling children, family portraits in which Raghav's smile appeared more like a performance than a truth. Aarav stood uneasily near the doorway, dripping water onto the floor, reluctant to soil the space that felt so far removed from the streets he called home. Meera returned with a towel. "Here," she said, offering it. Their hands brushed for an instant, an accidental touch, yet enough to send a tremor through them both. She quickly withdrew, her eyes lowering. The twins bounded into the room, delighted to see him there. "You came inside," Anaya exclaimed, tugging at his sleeve. Arian grinned. "Now you can stay for dinner." Meera opened her mouth to protest, but the children's pleading eyes weakened her resolve. With a sigh, she set the table. The meal was simple, rice, vegetables, lentils, but for Aarav, it was the first home-cooked food he had tasted in months. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware of the way Meera watched him from across the table, her expression unreadable. It was not just pity in her eyes. It was recognition of a soul carrying burdens much like her own. Later, when the children had gone to their room, Meera lingered in the kitchen while Aarav helped dry the dishes. Their conversation was quiet, almost cautious, yet it carried a weight deeper than ordinary words. She spoke of her days, how Raghav was often gone on business trips, how silence filled the house more often than laughter. Aarav shared fragments of his past, the illness that had taken his wife, the slow unraveling of his life afterward. Neither sought sympathy. They spoke because the other was listening, truly listening. At one point, Meera's voice faltered. "Sometimes I feel like I live beside a stranger," she confessed, drying her hands with deliberate slowness. "He provides everything money can buy. But when I need warmth, when I need someone," she stopped, as if realizing she had said too much. Her cheeks flushed, and she turned away. Aarav's chest tightened. He wanted to step closer, to offer comfort, yet he knew the danger of that desire. Still, the silence between them brimmed with unspoken truths. He saw the loneliness etched into her every gesture, and it mirrored his own. Before either could continue, a phone rang in the next room. Meera stiffened. The ringtone was Raghav's private line. She answered, her voice polite, restrained. Aarav could not hear the words, only the tone, curt, dismissive, ending abruptly. When she returned, her expression was blank, but her eyes shimmered with something brittle. "He won't be back tonight," she said flatly. "Business trip." The phrase carried more weight than its simplicity suggested. Aarav understood. Raghav's absence was not business alone. It was choice, perhaps betrayal. Meera's lips pressed together, as though holding back everything she wished she could say. The rain had eased, yet Aarav did not leave immediately. Instead, they stood by the window together, watching droplets slide down the glass. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the distant laughter of the twins playing upstairs. It was in that quiet that temptation stirred strongest. Meera spoke at last, her voice almost a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to be seen. Not as someone's wife, not as a caretaker, just as a woman." Aarav turned to her, his heart thundering. "You deserve that," he said simply. Their eyes met. In that gaze, something shifted. It was not yet betrayal in action, but it was already betrayal in thought, in desire, in the pull of two wounded souls leaning toward one another. Meera's breath caught, and she looked away, breaking the spell. "You should go," she murmured. "The rain has stopped." He obeyed, stepping out into the damp night. But as he walked away, the warmth of her words clung to him like the scent of rain on the earth. For the first time in years, he felt not only remembered, but needed. And though he knew the line between them was dangerous, he also knew he would return. The breaking point. Weeks passed, and with each one, Aarav became less of a stranger in the household. At first, it was the twins who pulled him closer, insisting he walk them home from school, begging him to fix a broken kite, or asking him to tell a story before bed. But gradually, it was Meera who began to anticipate his presence. She noticed the quiet steadiness in him, the patience with which he listened, the gentleness that contrasted so painfully with Raghav's coldness. And Aarav noticed her too. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way her laugh sounded rare, but unguarded when the children teased her, the way her voice softened only when speaking to him. For a man who had lost everything, these small observations became lifelines, proof that he was still capable of feeling something beyond grief. One evening, Raghav returned home unexpectedly. His expensive cologne filled the hallway before his voice did, sharp and dismissive, cutting into the air like a blade. The twins ran to greet him, but he brushed past them, phone in hand, muttering about a meeting. He barely glanced at Meera. Aarav, who had been repairing Arian's toy on the porch, froze at the sound of Raghav's irritation. Through the open door, he saw Meera shrink back, her shoulders tightening as though preparing for a blow that never came. Raghav's presence was brief. He grabbed an overnight bag, left a set of curt instructions for Meera, and was gone again, his car disappearing into the night. The silence he left behind was heavier than his voice had been. Aarav returned the toy to Arian, but his eyes lingered on Meera, who stood in the doorway, her face pale, her lips pressed tight. When the children ran off to play, Aarav stepped closer. "You don't have to endure that," he said quietly. Her eyes flickered to his, tired yet searching. "What choice do I have? I gave him vows, a home, children, and still, he gives nothing back." She paused, swallowing hard. "Worse, I suspect he gives himself to others." Aarav's jaw tightened. The truth hung there, unspoken but undeniable. He wanted to reach for her, to tell her she deserved more, but he held back, afraid of the line that separated comfort from betrayal. That line blurred further a week later, on a night when the twins had fallen asleep early. Meera and Aarav sat together in the living room, the lamp casting a soft glow that made the space feel both intimate and fragile. Meera poured tea, her hands trembling slightly as she set his cup before him. "I never thank you," she admitted, staring into her cup, "for being here, for listening, for reminding me I'm not invisible." Aarav's voice was low. "You're not invisible. You're remarkable." Her breath caught, and she looked at him as if seeing herself reflected in his eyes for the first time. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, as though drawn by a force greater than themselves, their hands touched across the table. Her fingers curled around his, hesitant but unwilling to let go. The silence deepened, charged with something dangerous. Aarav knew he should pull back, knew this was the edge of a cliff he might never climb back from. But when Meera's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, restraint shattered. He rose, moving her aside, and she did not step away. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, her body trembling with years of loneliness finally given permission to break. Aarav wrapped his arms around her, not as a savior, not as a thief, but as a man who understood what it meant to be lost. "Tell me this is wrong," she whispered, though her grip on him tightened. "It is," he admitted, "but I can't walk away." The words were both confession and surrender. And when she lifted her face, their lips met, not in a hurried act of desire, but in a slow, aching kiss that carried every unspoken truth between them. The world outside seemed to vanish, leaving only the heat of two broken hearts daring to find solace in one another. When the kiss ended, guilt rushed in like a tide. Meera pulled back, her hands covering her face. "What have we done?" Aarav's own chest ached with conflict. "What we both needed," he said gently. "But it doesn't make it easier." She shook her head, tears brimming. "If Raghav knew." "He doesn't see you," Aarav interrupted, his voice steadier than he felt. "And that is his choice, not yours." The clock struck midnight, its chime echoing through the quiet house. Meera rose abruptly, retreating toward the stairs. "I need to check on the children," she said, her voice thin. Aarav remained in the living room, his pulse still racing, his heart torn between elation and dread. He had crossed the line. They both had. And though guilt clawed at him, another truth lingered, undeniable. He could no longer imagine his days without her. From upstairs came the sound of a door closing softly. Aarav exhaled, leaning back into the chair, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. The conflict was no longer about what he felt. It was about whether they could survive the cost of giving into it. The choice. The house felt colder in the days that followed. Meera carried on with her routines, packing school lunches, folding laundry, answering polite questions from neighbors. But something inside her had shifted. Every glance at Aarav held the memory of that kiss. Every silence between them vibrated with the weight of what they had shared. Aarav, too, moved differently. He still fixed toys, still laughed with the twins, but his eyes carried an awareness that had not been there before. He wanted to protect her, to give her the affection she deserved, yet he knew the danger they both courted. Their bond was no longer a quiet companionship. It was a secret flame threatening to consume them. Raghav's return only sharpened the tension. One evening, he came home earlier than expected, his expression dark with suspicion. Meera had prepared dinner, the table neatly set, but Raghav's gaze swept over her with thinly veiled contempt. "You've changed," he said abruptly, breaking the silence halfway through the meal. "Distracted. Distant. Don't think I haven't noticed." Meera kept her eyes lowered, her spoon trembling slightly against the bowl. Aarav, sitting in the next room with the twins, caught the tone and stiffened. "Maybe it's because you're never here," Meera replied quietly. Raghav laughed bitterly. "Don't pretend this is about me. I provide everything you and the children need. If you're restless, perhaps it's because you're seeking elsewhere." His words dripped with accusation, and though he offered no proof, his eyes narrowed with growing certainty. That night, after the children slept, Meera sat in her room alone, her heart pounding. She wanted to deny, to argue, but deep down she knew his suspicion was not wrong. She had already given a part of herself to another man. The realization both terrified and liberated her. The following morning, as sunlight spilled across the park, Aarav waited on the bench. Meera joined him, her steps slow, her face pale with exhaustion. "He suspects," she whispered. Aarav turned to her, jaw tight. "Then you must decide. Either I step away forever, or we stop hiding and face whatever comes." Her eyes shimmered with tears. It isn't so simple. I build a life with him, even if it's empty. The children deserve stability. The children deserve love, Aarav countered gently. And so do you. She wanted to argue, but his words cut through every layer of her denial. For years, she had endured a marriage that gave her safety but stripped her spirit. Now, with Aarav, she had glimpsed something she thought lost forever: warmth, tenderness, belonging. That night, while folding laundry, she discovered what she had feared: proof of Raghav's own betrayal. A hotel receipt fell from his jacket pocket, dated only days before, with a woman's name scrawled across it. Meera held the slip of paper in trembling hands, anger and relief warring inside her. Relief, because the guilt that had gnawed at her now had context. She was not the only one who had strayed. When Raghav returned, she confronted him. "How long?" she asked simply, holding up the receipt. His eyes flickered, then hardened. "You're imagining things." "Don't lie," she said, her voice steady now. "I've lived in lies long enough." For the first time, Raghav seemed unsettled. His usual dominance faltered, replaced by a sharp defensiveness. "Even if it's true, what of it? You'll stay. For the children. For the life I've given you. You wouldn't survive without me." But Meera's voice was calm when she replied, "I already have someone who reminds me I can survive without you." His expression darkened, but she no longer feared him. She turned, walking away before his anger could bind her again. The next morning, she met Aarav outside with the twins. The children ran to him, their joy untainted by the turmoil of adults. Meera watched them, then met Aarav's eyes. "I found proof," she said. "He betrayed me long before I betrayed him." Aarav said nothing at first. He simply took her hand, his touch warm, steady, grounding. The choice that had haunted them now seemed clear, though the path ahead would not be easy. The twins tugged at Aarav's arm, their voices bright. "Will you stay with us now? Will you be our father?" Meera's throat tightened. She glanced at Aarav, who hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If your mother wishes it." Her answer came not in words, but in the way she intertwined her fingers with his, refusing to let go. Together, they began walking, toward the future, toward uncertainty, but also toward love. Behind them, the old life still loomed, heavy with shadows. But before them stretched a road lined with possibility. Meera knew she would carry scars. Aarav knew guilt would follow him. Yet neither could deny the truth any longer. They had chosen each other, not as an escape, but as the only way forward. And as the twins laughed, running ahead under the morning light, Meera whispered to herself, "At last, I am seen."